Hi folks, welcome to my series called Walk With Me, where I go and take my camera for a walk and we take a bunch of shots of birds and sometimes some flowers, and when I get home I put them onto the computer and I show you how I process them. So I hope you enjoy today. We're going to have lots of pardalotes, and before that we have a few of the local spring flowers and one or two honeyeaters as well. Alright, let's get into it. When I drove up to the zoo, and I parked my car there and I can walk around this area, and just the light coming through the trees was really lovely here. We didn't get much light in the morning yesterday. The clouds came in, but I got a little bit of light just when I got there. You can see here I'm using that shallow depth of field so that I can see all the poker in the background, but also some bokeh in the foreground. And just to give you an idea, if I run through some of these pictures, it'll give you an idea as to how my thought process is happening while I'm taking these shots. And then I'm trying to find different ways to compose my primary subject. And then we get into some of the crested pigeons. But I'm just going to start with some of these pictures of the flowers. Because even though I went to shoot birds, I often find I end up shooting lots of flowers as well. So one of the things I do when I've got a high contrast scene, I like to use that dynamic range. So here I'm going to pull out some of the shadow detail so that I can see all those tones that are coming through, and I can see what happens when I flatten out the highlights as well. Because if the highlights are too harsh, you lose a bit of detail, particularly down here. If I zoom into this little bit here, you can see all that detail there is really, really critical to me. And if you don't sort of bring back those highlights in such high contrasty light, then that can be a problem. And there you go. That's the sort of little scene which I enjoy. But just to give you an idea, when I got there, I saw some of these crested pigeons, and I hadn't actually been out to shoot some birds in a while, and so I end up taking photos of just about everything I see. And these guys were pretty cute. You can see they've got those really, really beautiful colours. They're not so plain. They've got a little bit of green down here, like a tealy green, going on down the sides. There's somewhere I've even got them properly in focus as well. Sometimes when I haven't actually gone out for a while, I just need to get re-familiarized with my camera gear. And so here there's a system on the G9 where I can press a button and it zooms in on the frame so that I'm only using a tiny little part of the frame to precisely guide the focus. Because if I try to focus here and the zone is too big, it could catch the grass here, it could catch the twigs at the back. And there's a little bit on the G9 where I can be very, very precise and land it right on the eye. And that's what's happened here. I've gone in and used that much more precise mode. Also, that light's not great. It's pretty flat at that particular moment. And then a little bit while later, the sun actually came out, although he's quite nice there. He's got a little bit of sharpness. You can see the ISO is pretty high there. That's 2500. When the light's good, that doesn't matter so much. When the light's not good, that's when you're going to see the most grain. There's a little bit of grain in there, but certainly to have a sharp shot with a little bit of grain is better than to have a blurry shot with no grain. Anyway, there's our crested pigeon. And you can see the sun then came out. And so you can see the difference that the light makes between that and that. It's the same bird, it's the same scene. And then the sun has come out, and of course the ISO is down to 400. Now, this is an underexposed shot if you're trying to expose for our bird. So if I try to bring it up, when you're bringing up an underexposed shot, often that's how you're going to get the worst problems with your ISO. So that's, there's a few things we can do here, but it's not going to be the ideal shot. That light's pretty harsh at that angle. It's not really what I'm aiming for, unless of course you want a silhouette of the bird. That would work just fine. But that's not really what I'm after. That's not my jam. So, you know, it's an interesting subject, but not interesting light. The light was not quite right for that subject. Where it does work is for something like this, where you get to peer through the flowers, and instead of heather, there's a little heather that's been caught there on the flower. There we go. So technically this is bird photography. Excellent. I'm just going to put a star on that one because that's one I might actually come back to and use as part of a series. And again, I'm just going to bring up some of that shadow detail. So here you can see how the shadow detail, when I pull that little levers in the middle, the midtones, I can really change the character of the shot. I can really bring in this dreamy content, you know, this dreamy style. And again, I'm just going to bring down the highlights just to bring back some of that detail because I don't want to blow out the highlights, but I do like that creamy, dreamy kind of look. That's a style which I quite like. And then the sun started to go away again, and then it came back for a little bit. So at this stage of the morning, the sun was coming and going. And I could tell I wasn't necessarily going to get a clean run at taking some photographs today. You can see the wattles are just going to seed here. They're just starting to drop out their seeds, which is really cool. And again, I love the way that light comes through, and I love just being able to have that nice and soft, that high key, staying in the high key. You can sort of bring back that black point if you want, but you know, this particular style I'm going for at the moment, that works for me. Anyway, we should find some birds. You can see here I found this particular leaf. The curve of the leaf was really lovely, but I didn't have the light. The light was okay. It just wasn't what I would usually aim for. I would want that light really coming through, and then a couple of minutes later, the sun actually came out, and boom. You see the difference it makes when you've got some light. Oops, hit the wrong key there. There we go. And so I end up just taking a whole bunch of different compositions. And here I'm just going to harden up the blacks, not too much because I don't want it black. And if I really wanted to, I could also clean up some of these things that just sort of distract from the eye. And you could even argue perhaps even some of the spider webs do, but for me they're part of the shot. They're integral, those webs in there, where they are there, you know, that's where some of the characters are coming from. I really like that stuff. That really appeals to me. And so I would probably keep quite a few of those. And the key is that I really want that leaf sharp. Oh, look at the sharpness on that. That's beautiful. That's where I want it to land. And again, that's just a little bit distracting for me. Is that a good spot to peel from? That looks all right. I prefer to get it from over here because I can tell my cloning tool where to heal that from. Okay, so this, by the way, is the 100 to 400 mil on the G9. So at 400 mil, we're shooting at f6.3. That's as wide open as it gets. But even still, with 400 mil, you get that beautiful soft background. There's enough separation between your subject and the background. You still get the bokeh. That's the really good thing with a long lens. This lens is wonderful. It's very light, very, very light, which means it's great just to drop into your bag when you're going to the park and just to have it on you if you're going for a walk. We will get into birds, I promise. I'm just seeing that there's a few of these ones here with the flowers, and I was just gonna give that a little bit of treatment. And again, I do love that really soft, ethereal look. For me, that works. That's something I'll be keen to share on my Twitter. That'll be nice. And I like some of the detail here too. I think that's a little bit too bright in there. Sometimes I find, particularly when I've got a scene like this where the colors are really, really pumped up by bringing up the shadow detail, sometimes I have to bring down the saturation. I just have to come off and I get a much more natural feel. Don't usually have to take them off too much, but I do like to bring it down. And again, just a note with processing. So here we've got this spider web. If I wanted to, I could actually clean that out. clean it out by cloning it out. And I'm just going to give myself a larger brush just to give you an example. So I hit a point there, and then I go down and hit shift and I hit that, and it picks out a point to clone with. Did an okay job, but it's gone and picked a slightly less than perfect spot for that. I'm going to suggest it does it. Where am I going to go? About there. Maybe something like that. And now it just doesn't clash with the scene quite so much. Anyway, that's the kind of stuff I like to do. Now, look at that. That's quite nice. So, ooh, this bit was good. Of course, the sun has gone again. I've later found out that this was a hot bush. But even in this light, it's a very soft light, but I still like it. But it's a different kind of processing. In fact, let's undo that. I just sort of brought through the previous one. You can see in this really a softer light, when it isn't as harsh, the colors are actually pretty strong to begin with. And so I really do feel I need to come off that saturation and maybe warm it up because it's quite cool. It's my layers. Where do I want? I want my white balance. So I'm just going to warm it up a little bit, just a smidge, just like that. Feels a bit warmer. Now I don't want to bring up the midtones too much because now it's just really flat. You know, there isn't anything in it. So I'm just going to leave that as is. Maybe drop out the saturation a bit more. Now sometimes I might harden up the black point, just the black point. You can see how that sort of brings back some of the definition. I'm just going to put back the mid-tone so that I still have my black point. It's hard, but I wash out the mid-tone a bit. Okay, so let's have a look at what that looks like before and after, give you an idea. So it's a very, very kind of creamy, dreamy look, which I'm going for here. So that might not appeal to everyone. But you can see it's a different treatment for when you're doing low contrast scene as opposed to high contrast. And then I can copy that treatment and I can bring it through and paste it onto something else like this one here. I can use that exact same treatment. Oh, I like that. That's really nice. Maybe I'll bring up the white point a little bit for contrast, bring down the black point again. You can see I'm playing with contrast in the white point and the black point. Not right across the whole thing. If you change the whole thing, you know, things get pretty harsh. Put that back to 0. I'm trying to move the contrast in a much more controlled way. So in the middle, I kind of want it soft and flat. And on the edges, I kind of want the black's black and the white's white. So I just basically bring in those curves. And you can decide how far is too far. But I'm just going to bring in those curves a bit. Anyway, that's quite nice. That's in the ballpark for me. Now, think pretty soon the light came back again because I was taking a flower of this hot bush. Oh yeah, that's right. This little brown thornbill came in. I didn't have much luck with him. You know, I got a couple of shots. He's in the back there. And I was taking shots of the flowers, and this little guy just came right past me. And, you know, there's another blurry shot of a brown thornbill. The problem I find with the thornbills is that by the time you get your 800 mils aimed at the bird, he's not where you were. So, you know, trying to actually, the time it takes to line it up. And here I've come close. Didn't quite get there, but I've come close. What a beautiful little fella. They're so tiny. No one ever sees these guys. They're so tiny. You know, people come down to this park and they walk and they jog and they ride their bikes and stuff, and they never even see the birds. It's a waste. It's a waste. Okay, so he's just outside the plane of focus. So I've obviously landed it on, you know, the branches here or something like that instead of on him. The fact that I even got within, you know, even anywhere near a shot of this guy is just remarkable. He was just so fast. And that's actually, I've actually got the focus in the right point, but he's just sort of turning his head and twisting. If I sort of bring up that exposure, you can see his head is turning. Having a stabilized lens is great, but it doesn't stop your actual subject from moving. So even at 200th of a second, just because your lens is stabilized doesn't mean you're going to get a sharp shot if your subject is moving. That's the problem. And oh, look, there we go. He's actually sharp in that one. Isn't that great? So you can see that in this particular sequence, I've actually grabbed a focus, the bird has moved, and then I've just simply brought my lens up to where the bird is, and I'm holding the shutter, and the shutter is still going. Okay, so I'm just holding down the shutter, and I'm tracking the bird, and he stayed in roughly the right plane of focus. That's not the camera, that's just the bird has stayed in, a pretty good plane of focus, and now it gives me a reasonable chance to see exactly what bird I was looking at, because you may not have been able to tell before. And again, I don't like the processing to be too harsh. And look, this is not my best shot of a brown thornbill, I'll tell you now. But let's give it some treatment. So I've just tried to take the contrast out of the mid-range just by bringing up that shadows in the mid-range. Okay. And I've warmed up the tones. I think it's a little on the green side as well. I think the light coming through the leaves, all the light is green. I'm trying to shoot a bird with green light, not white light. So I'm just going to counteract a little bit of that green. And I wonder if I'm just bring that exposure down a smidge now that I've got that in the ballpark. And I can just sort of bring up that white point, because that's what's going to help things to be sharp. So, I don't have a lot of pixels on this bird, but I've got some. And if we were to crop that in, what would we get? What's my cropping on this? That must be a 2/3 crop. I quite like a square crop these days. It's what I use a lot for my social media, just because I can. So, I like to leave a little bit of the scene there. Don't like to hide the whole scene. And there's a brown thornbill. Well, that was a nice bit of luck. And if I want to just make this shot a little easier on the eye, I'm just going to put in a little bit of counterbalance in the top there. Okay, so that darkens up the sky. I could go overboard and just brighten up our little chappy here. Bring him up a little bit for exposure, and then just harden up that black a little bit more. And now I can bring up the overall scene now that I've darkened up the scene. There we go. Something like that. And now the eye comes into where the thornbill is. And that's quite nice. That's actually the first time I've seen a thornbill in that park, because I've never thought to look before. He just happened to come right past me. That was great. All right, so he didn't hang around long, not as long as I would have liked, because they move. These guys just move, they really do. What came along next? All right, we've got a New-Holland Honeyeater, and I'm standing in the same spot, by the way. I haven't moved. I don't need you. The birds come to you. It's wonderful. So these guys are nice birds. I got some slightly clearer shots of these guys later on, I'm pretty sure. And also that light, the light's not on just yet. And then when the light came out, when the clouds broke a bit, I went back and shot my hot bush again. So I now have a whole series of these shots of the hot bush, which I really like. I just love that light coming through the scene. What I'm looking for here, I just want something sharp in the scene. So let's go with this one. Is he sharp? He's pretty sharp. I think my focus is in the right spot, and that's a nice scene. And again, I was going to bring up that shadow detail because it's got that creaminess, dreamy. Go hard on that and maybe bring back some of that black point. There you go. And there's one of my hot bushes. So I'll keep that one. Definitely want to have a portrait version as well. I've got a few to choose from. I'm just going to speed through. There are some that are closer than others. So that's where I was stepping back a bit. That's fine. Then I stepped in a little bit. That's nice too. Keep that one. And then that one. Yeah, that one's probably, I'll give that 2 stars instead of 1. That way I'll know it was the one I liked when I come back. And definitely good to keep one of these. In fact, I'm just going to put a gradient on that too. Again, because that top is just a little bit a little bit heavy, and as I bring that up, now I can bring down the overall shot. I'm going to realign that gradient. Come back to my background, and there we go. That looks roughly where I want. I don't even want the blacks that black. Maybe bring back a little bit of the highlights, soften that out a little bit. That's nice. That's where I want it. I'll give that a star. That means I'm going to keep it. It won't get deleted. Now this was really lovely. So I'm taking photos of the hot bush, and in the corner of my eye I can see there's a bunch of rustling going on in the grass. If you look really closely down here, it's a 40 Spotted Pardalote. He's down there. For some reason, he's kind of making a big fuss down here. Now, of course, this is a terrible angle. I'm trying to shoot through a whole bunch of grass and stuff, and he's on the wrong side of it, and my camera is focusing on the grass. In this particular situation, that's not so surprising. What's going on is he's actually trying to grab himself. And I took a little video so I can play that. This is at 180 frames per second. So this is a high-speed capture, so that's why it plays back slowly. That's how you get the slow motion. You can see he's trying to actually grab the blades of grass for making a nest, and so he picks them up one by one and he's stuffing them into his beak. And at the moment, he's decided this is the grass that he wants, and he's going to rip them out. But he's having a little bit of trouble with some of them. And he's just reaching in and he's tearing out the grass. Now, it never occurred to me that the birds would actually tear up plants to get the bits they want, as opposed to just, to get the bits that are on the ground or whatever. But, they're being choosy. They're picking out the bits of grass they want. And he doesn't seem too fussed by me. Like, he's being careful. He's keeping an eye out. He's watching the scene, and he's tearing out the grass. So now I really love the light, the way it's coming through and all the poker and everything. It's just that I don't have him in focus, and I can't really see him properly anyway. And so I decided to walk around, and I think I've just basically got 2 more minutes of him just sort of like tearing up the grass. And it seemed to me he was going to be there for a while. Here we go. You can sort of see his little face in there. And unfortunately, this is about where the light went. So by the time I walked around, I thought he would fly off, but he stayed there. So let's have a walk through. And here I'm taking some shots. The light's not so good because the sunlight's now gone. At 200th of a second, he's kind of blurry. So here I've got the focus is landing on him. You can see all the detail in the feathers. That's how the spots are. The spots aren't actually well-defined spots. They're just where the feathers are changing and turning from black to white. So even though he's sharp and he's in the correct point of focus, at 200th of a second, every time he shakes his head, he's going to be blurry. So the camera's doing it, but he's not standing still. And of course, there I've got his back, and you can just see the red color that's on his tail there that they're really famous for with the boys. So I just wait, and I just keep taking some shots, and so I'm actually refocusing quite a lot, and this is a technique which I prefer. The idea is that I won't always get the focus right, but in one of those, I'm going to get it just right. And so here, I think I've got it just wrong. I think I've got it just behind him. Let me see what's happened there. Yeah, this was so cool. So here, he's trying to grab this piece, and he goes to fly off to break it, and it doesn't break. And he's up there. He's just sort of like hanging there in the air. And the grass does not break, and he comes back down again, the poor guy. So I do have a Twitter account that's for blurry birds, and so that's going in it. That account is for the ones where I don't actually get the bird right and everything's blurry, and I think that's one of my favorites. I'm gonna tag those to make sure I come back to it. So when he lands back down again, how sharp is that? I think it's more sharp on the rear than on his eye. So the sharp I can see on the rear I can see the sharpness of the feathers, but on his eye not so sharp. And that's not too bad. That looks a little better. So there he's pretty sharp. Now I haven't done anything to the processing here. Just keep that in mind. So it could be we get to see that a little bit more clearly when we process. And there you can see how the blueness when they turn their heads. That's always a problem. Then boom, now he's sharp. That's a sharp shot. That's a pardalote, a tiny little bird, and that's nice and sharp. Now again, I didn't want to get too close because he's in the middle of trying to make a nest, and I didn't want to disturb that too much. In fact, I was quite happy if he simply ignored me entirely. And there I feel he's probably wondering why I'm pointing a lens at him. I don't like this grass that's coming across there. It's a little bit distracting. It's not the end of the world, but it's something like this. It kind of adds to the chaos. That tells you what the bird is doing, where the bird is. It tells you something about their behavior. So I don't mind that overall scene. So I'm going to bring up that shadow detail to begin with, and I'm going to bring down the highlights. See how that basically flattens it out. You can see in the foreground that really, really flattens it out. If I just sort of turn that off, you can see the difference that makes. Look at that. That really changes the scene. And it depends if you want it flat or if you want it perky or if you want it bright. I know people who go and just drag that contrast and go, look at my shot. Not my style, not my thing. And the thing is, once you get used to seeing it a certain way, that becomes your normal. It can be hard to see that there's a different way. I want to be pretty gentle with these things. I want to be pretty gentle. I don't want to lose that detail. Anywhere there's detail, I really want to keep it. And again, there's not a lot of room for composition here. Sorry, there's not a lot of room to zoom in on this shot. But I quite like what's going on. I quite like the chaos of it all. And that's how I would do it. I like to keep my subject out of the center of the frame if I can. I don't want everything right in the center. And now I'm going to do something which might seem counterintuitive, to spending all this money on a beautiful lens, and that 100-400, that Panasonic, it is a gorgeous lens. It's so light and it is so sharp, and there's no drop off in the corners and all that sort of stuff. I'm now going to put in some vignette. So we go to all this trouble to get a really great lens that doesn't actually vignette, and then I just go and actually put back the vignette with my processing. Seems kind of weird, but it just helps to bring the eye back into the subject, because the subject is darker than a lot of the scene, and so often I will use that vignette to achieve that effect. Now I could go to the trouble here to make just to brush in a layer there as well, and again, now here I'm just going to bring up the shadow detail rather than bring up the exposure. I'm just going to bring up the shadow detail. Right, that looks pretty good. That's looking close to where I want to get it. Maybe just once I bring up that, I can bring down the overall scene. And you can see all that detail. Now I could probably harden it up again. In fact, I'm just going to harden it up just inside that adjustment layer. So if I go like too far, let's see what happens. Right, you can see what happens there. My laptop's running a little slow at the moment. Probably because it's recording all this. So let's go for that. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, I think it's a little heavy for me. I think for my preferences, I like it a little bit lighter. Might just ease off that a smidge. And there you go. There's a pardalote working on his nest. So no bird call, no callback. There's no tricks involved. I'm not trying to bring him in with food or with sounds and stuff. I'm just basically standing by the edge of the trail, watching to see what birds actually come and go. And I could hear the pardalotes calling. Before this moment, I heard the pardalotes calling. And I was probably standing there for about a half an hour all up. Like what's our time? what's our timestamp here? So the sunlight came out here on these guys. I should be able to find a timestamp on here that says 10:03 a.m. And then when did I leave? So my last shots, because I got a few more Pardalotes in there, I'm going to share with you. My last shots when I left, what was this guy? Oh, is that our Pardalote as well? Oh yeah, that's right. That's at 10:30. So there you go. There's a half an hour worth of Pardalotes that we're seeing. And I'm just in the one spot. I'm a very slow walker, it turns out. Now, where's our little guy? Okay, there's our little guy here. That the same. There's the one we just processed. There's the one that we just processed. I'm just going to copy that treatment. And something I often do, I often then go and find the next frame on that's also sharp, and I simply tag that one so that I have more than one, just in case I lose the file or I damage it or, you know, something goes wrong on the hard drive. Always good to have a couple. Look at that amazing little fella. And there you can see the colors a little more there, and the colors are nice. I might add that to my blurry birds set as well. So, you know, at this point, I have quite a few shots of our little guy doing his thing, and there he's, you know, trying to take off with the grass as well. These ones here, I actually quite like that pose, but again, I've got this great big, you know, blade of grass that's running right through the middle of them. But I'll keep a couple anyway. I know what I'm going to do with them. Look at that. Look at that beautiful, beautiful little fella. So that's now, when I double click on this, that's the whole frame, and then I double click on it and it goes to 100%. So that's pixel for pixel. That's my actual pixels that you're seeing there. So that gives you an idea as to how much detail you're able to pull out with these cameras. And just a word on processing. You can see I'm not doing much. And I think that's a really good idea. You don't need to grab every single tool and slider and grab the sharpener and grab the clarity and grab the contrast, and, you know, don't grab everything. The less you do, the less range of things you do with your pictures, the better. You don't need to grab everything. You just need to grab some things, and grab the tool that's going to actually make the difference that you want, you know. And that looks really good. You know, I really like that scene there. I think that's really lovely. And it's great to see this bird from all these different angles. You can see there the sun is just starting to come out a little bit. I've got a little bit of shadow on there. The sun is just starting to return, and he goes. And he's off. He's gone. And he's done. So that was really special. And then one of the Honeyeaters came in, the New-Holland Honeyeaters. And again, I really love to peer through the foliage at things. You can see he's sharp. So, you know, the autofocus is doing exactly what I want it to do. It's seeing through the foliage and it's seeing into the bird. And it's working really well there. He's got some attitude, kind of a quirky pose. And again, I just love the idea of keeping this nice and soft, keeping the scene soft. I'm just going to ease off some of the saturation there. Don't need quite so much. Again, I'm going to put in a little extra vignette. Not too much, because if you make it really obvious, it's like, oh, okay. It sounds like something went wrong at the camera club. And instead, you just want a little bit, just to guide the eye in just a bit. You shouldn't notice the vignette, but it should have an effect. So that, for me, is a really lovely scene. I really like that. I'm quite happy with that. I don't think I need to do much more there. Again, that's at ISO 1000. Not a lot of light in there, but the camera can handle it. The camera's doing a good job on that. And I might keep one of these for my blurry birds as well, because that's a good blurry bird shot. Yes, there we go. So the parties were there. So here's the thing. It feels like there were two families of Pardalotes. So that one's got a little bit of something in the nest. That's the boy again. Oh, that's right. He was at the other end of the creek. There were some people were doing some work at a construction site, and they walked down to the creek, and he flew all the way to the far end of the creek. And I don't think the people realised that they were disturbing some nesting Pardalotes. That That might be the same bird. That might be the same bird. I don't know. He was a long way away though. But I quite like the idea of this great big scene, and you don't even realize that there's a bird in there, but there is a bird in there. I quite like that idea. All right, so let's just bring him. Let's do a little bit of processing. There's not much I can do there. It's kind of a flat image. It's not my best image, but it'll be interesting to post this and to see if anyone goes, oh my God, there is a bird in there. Or people go, wow, that's really boring. We'll find out. I suspect a lot of people won't actually see the bird. Is that a better pose? Yeah. That's the problem. It's just, it's a tiny little bird in a great big scene. We'll see if anyone even notices that there's a bird there. Yeah, I'll keep a couple of those. All right, so there was another bunch of pardalotes there too. Can you see that? So there's a wood pile there, and this other pardalote is in there. There's actually two. There's another one off over here to the right. And I just had to pick one and try to get a lock on it. It's very hard to focus on something right through there. But again, the camera's done a pretty good job. Again, the light's not so good. We're up to ISO 2500. So, it's going to be a little on the grainy side compared to what's ideal. But look at that. Look at that. We're still actually, in the middle of all that, we can still actually get a shot. Isn't that amazing? Can't believe what these cameras can do. Just can't believe it. So yeah, it's not going to be the best shot of a pardalote that you ever saw. Now there's some debate as to whether this is the female or whether this is a juvenile. Because the juveniles have like the browny colors on top, and the females have the yellow spots instead of the white spots. So is that yellow, or is it kind of a browny buff? Also, the black line through the eyes is not properly developed yet. So I think it might be a younger female. Hasn't quite come into its complete range of colors. And off she goes. Boom. She's gone. And there she is. No, sorry, there he is. Is that him or her? Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that's the same bird. Yes, I think it's the same bird. Again, this one, just above the wood pile, I've got my focus is in the wrong spot. I've gone a little bit too deep on my focus. That happens, especially when they turn around and stare at you. Ooh, that looks like a good blurry bird shot. Very blurry. Now, did any of those get sharp? See, that one's possibly sharp. That one's not. The other thing that happens is that when I start to take a shot and I just start leaning in a bit, and if you move just the width of your hand is 3 times wider than a bird. So if you move at all, if you lean in, you're going to lose the shot. So that's at ISO 4000. That's a little bit of a push. But I'm still glad I have that shot. I like it. Not going to win any prizes, tell you that, but that's all right. Oh yeah, and then up here there was a starling just cleaning itself. So I'm standing in the same spot, and I'm being constantly distracted by things, and I'm watching this starling to see if there's a shot there. The light's a little bit tricky. Is it a starling? What am I looking at there? I'm not sure if that's a starling or not. I just assumed it was a starling. I'm going to bring up some of that shadow detail. This is the problem with being a photographer, not a birder. Sometimes you see something you don't actually know what you're looking at. I just assumed it was a starling, but I'm not sure. I'm going to have to ask for some help from someone on that one. And then some of these guys came through again. This guy hanged in there for quite a while, this New-Holland Honeyeater. And again, I'm just going to use that vignette just to darken the corners just a bit. See how that just brings the focus right into him. The other thing I could do, I could actually paint in a layer, because you see how this is a little bit bright. And I was going to paint in that layer, and now I'm going to darken that exposure in that layer, nice and soft. That just helps to pull back Is there anything in the dynamic range? Not much. It just helps to pull back the scene so it's not actually crowding it so much. But there's a beautiful shot of a New-Holland Honeyeater that's had a pretty good morning. He's got a bit of pollen on his gob still. He's been busy. I quite like that pose. He's nice. And he hung around for quite a while, actually. He was quite friendly. There's a few more poses. I'm just going to drop the exact same treatment on that. There you go. That's nice. Have you stayed in the plane of focus? Yes, you have. Makes it good. Nice and sharp. That's what you want to see. And what I was doing here, I was actually hoping to wait for him to take off. So I set my camera to use the pre-shutter mode. Now let's see if he actually does take off. That's a slightly different position for that gradient. So let's jump through these and see. I know there's a lot of nice poses there. Oh, that's right. The first time I accidentally hit the shutter on the pre-shutter, and so that's why I've got a whole bunch of shots of him just basically sitting there. And then the second time, that's exactly what we got. We got him taking off. Fortunately, he took off towards me instead of off to the left of scene. I was hoping he would go off to the left of scene. So the way this works with the G9, what's happening here is I'm holding down the shutter halfway and it's activating the pre-shutter. And the pre-shutter or the pre-burst, it keeps on taking photos with a silent shutter constantly. So it's taking a series of photos. And inside the camera, it can take up to 50 photos before they write to card. And it devotes half of that to the pre-burst. This is getting technical. So basically, when I hold down the shutter, it rolls through 25 frames worth of whatever's going on through the lens. And then the moment I see the bird actually move, so I'd probably seen that, because there's a little bit of lag time, right? Like by the time I've realized the bird is gone and I commit the rest of the shutter, whatever 25 frames were in the buffer get written to card along with the next 25, okay? Because if you hold down the shutter, you get the entire 50. So if you have your pre-shutter set to 20 frames a second, you'll get basically 2 seconds worth of shots, plus a little bit more. If you have it set to 60 frames a second, you're not even getting an entire second. So it depends how fast your reactions are. So my reactions were so slow that that's the first frame out of the pre-burst that it kept, and it kept all of these. And there you go. So those are the frames which it kept. Would have been great if he'd gone off into the left of frame instead of actually flying at me, because yeah, that's kind of pretty blurry. That's not the shot we're looking for, but that's how the pre-burst works. So I'm going to try that again in the days to come, in the weeks to come, and try to find a slightly better example of how that works. So I'd realized that the light was definitely gone by this stage and I should head home. I'd seen the pardalote getting the grass. I'd seen the pardalotes in the wood pile, and the woodpile pair came in to check me out. And look what happened. This little girl, this guy or a girl? That's a girl. This little girl came right in to check me out. I could not believe it. She came right in. Let me just bring up that exposure bit so we can see what we're looking at. And I'm taking photos as she comes in. And I get to a point, now you can't see it because I don't have the photos, but she comes right in, that's her still. And then at this point, I'm trying to take photos of her as she's like so close. If I were to reach out my hand, I would have touched her. She came all the way in. I thought she was going to land on me. It's crazy. That's the second time that's happened to me standing in this spot. So, if you simply stand still, the birds will come. You don't have to use a callback and, treats and stuff. You're simply standing in the right spot. You might get lucky. And so I try not to use the callbacks, particularly when the birds are breeding or they're nesting and they've got other things that they need to focus on. If you start to work them with a callback play, then you're potentially causing them harm. So, I have mixed feelings when it comes to callbacks, because they're useful when it comes to photography, but they're not good for their ecology. So it depends what's more important, your photograph or the welfare of the bird. So there we go. Look, that's without any kind of callback. That's just from being patient. Just from being patient. Look at that beautiful, beautiful little bird. Isn't that amazing? Came right in. And for me, that's as good as it gets. That's well, okay. The light could be better. It's always about the light. Now, I think there's also a tendency that people go, great, here, I'm going to show you this photo that I took of a bird. And they zoom right in. And it's like, you don't actually need to do that. You've got this whole scene. Let's have a look at the scene. Let's see where the bird is. Let's frame our subject. Ideally, I would prefer, like if I just go with my original cropping, I'd prefer the bird out of the center of the frame too. I don't want everything in the middle. So, let's crop in a bit. I'm feeling I want a little bit more exposure on here. This is a little bit dark and the bum's a little bit bright. Again, let's just paint in a layer, and I'm just going to bring up that a little bit like that. Now it just sort of evens up the bird in our scene. I can bring back the overall scene a little bit. Sometimes I'll even go in and say to darken up a little spot instead of brightening up. And I'm going to do that there just to even things up. Right, so now across the board I can bring up my white point. You can see how it just gives it a little bit of a lift. If you go too far, it's not good. But it's kind of flat. Then I just want to give it a little bit of a lift, just up to about there. My black point is in, so that the blacks are black. And that's how I process a shot. I don't like to overdo it, and I don't like to manipulate the scene too much. I want the scene to be pretty honest. And that was a good day. That was a good day. Now, if you were to drag up that saturation, I think that looks really weird. I think it looks better if you just leave the saturation really natural. And depending on your camera, some cameras you do need to bring down the saturation. Some you definitely need to bring them up. I got to say the G9's been really, really gorgeous. The colors right out of the box are pretty good. So I don't think it, I just want to make sure I can see the yellow there. So long as I can see that that's yellow and I've got a little bit of orange in there, then I've got enough color, and I'm happy with that. So we're going to go with that. Just what a beautiful bird. What a beautiful moment. She just came right in. Look at that. She's checking me out. She wants to know what the hell I'm doing there in her space. So I'm just going to tag a couple of these to do some processing later. I popped one of these on my Twitter feed. It's been the most popular thing that I posted since accusing Malcolm Turnbull of not having a spine. Pardalotes are always very popular on social media, which is good. I'm glad that people are actually getting to know that they're out there. There's a lot of Australians that don't even know this bird exists. And I find that a little bit frustrating, and I feel that the tide is changing there a bit. I feel that we're getting to, that they're becoming part of our heritage and culture, that we actually know about these birds. Look at that detail. Isn't that amazing? Such tiny birds and such wonderful lives they lead. All right. And those are pretty much the highlights. I was actually having a chat to another birder who actually didn't realise that I was taking photos of this pardalote before. And then the pardalote was watching us having a chat, and that was my day. So there you go. There's a quick walkthrough of why it's really lovely to go for a walk in the park with a G9 and a 100 to 400 mil lens. Gives you an 800 mil perspective with amazing stabilization. The image stabilization is fantastic. All of these are handheld. There's no There's no tripod, there's no gimbal, there's none of that stuff. All of this is handheld. It's going to take off some of that yellow there. And it gives you incredibly sharp shots. The camera is doing so much of the work. It's making me look good. Definitely making me look good. It helps to give you rewards for the time that you're spending trying to see the birds, and that everybody else can see the birds that you're seeing as well. I love it. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.